Board games. We might be talking about advantage tokens, but we're not gonna shout. We are talking about many games. March of Progress and Twilight Struggle are some of their names. And we'll talk about how this thing moves back and forth as you decide. I've got the privilege to go north. Because maybe in a game where you can't go north normally, it might be a privilege that you can use, you see. But once you do, then you give it up, and that's the way it works. Board games, let's not be jerks. Board games, it's what I'm talking about. Board games, I'm not going to shout. Hello, good morning.
Hello.
Good afternoon, good whatever it is, wherever you are. 10 a.m. UK time for Bezzy Beats and Board Game Leather. And hello, Timmy, it is lovely to have you from Nova Scotia. Today we are pondering mechanisms. We are talking about the advantage token. And thank you, Alan Paull, for joining me, as always.
That's a pleasure. And thank you for joining me.
Yes. And
notice there's no barrier.
Yes. As opposed to normally every 2 weeks we are talking, but it's like there's a screen. I can literally poke.
Yes. Indeed. Yes, we are actually here looking out of a window at a blue sky. In
so as people who've looked at my public calendar will see, like I put in that I am away for a few days, so you expect shorter streams. Yesterday I was from the beautiful garden. Tomorrow I'll probably be from the garden again, doing something relatively quick. And yeah, just to not expect anything too long. But let's give a quick introduction to these advantage tokens. I mean, in your own words, how would you describe this?
It's a thing that you give up to your opponent in order to gain some form of advantage, which may be having your turn, it may be a special action, something like that.
That's a really good way to put it. So it's called advantage token, but it can be cards, or it can, and it's actually quite commonly cards. It feels like it's more commonly cards than tokens, just because cards are cheaper to produce.
Yeah.
If you've got cards anyway,
you can put the text on it, what it means.
I mean, look at these. We'll get into that, but like you can have multiple possibilities in one game. You can have an actual token in Airfix battles, as designed by. But let's put that on the hold for just a moment, and let's talk about recent highlights, living life and seeing the sights, recent highlights, playing games and other delights, recent highlights. So what have you been up to? And Alan, what have you enjoyed in the past week?
Well, actually, I mean, you being here is the main highlight. I mean, I would say it's just been absolutely brilliant to have you here to play test and play games and chat, everything.
And yesterday we played, Wheel of Death, or maybe Circle of Doom. We're not quite sure what it's called yet. Yeah. And someone suggested Wheel of Fortune, but I think there might be a game that sort of exists with that name.
But no, I liked the L deck variant that we
played
version, whatever it was called.
The L deck games.
The L deck game. Yes.
Like one of them is Triple, which is a speed game, and I think that for younger children, I think that I will go back to having just first for Beth. I would suggest playing 2 of a kind, like just start it off with that, and then progress to 3 of a kind for everything. And if it's a little bit less about the letters, that's a good thing. That balances it, because adults are better than letters, so hopefully children will be able to catch up a wee bit.
Yeah, that's lovely. And there was the other one where we
Who would win?
The arena. Who would win? Which hasn't got an L on it yet, but I'm sure we'll have. And that's a new game.
Yes, that's the first time that I've ever played it.
I did really like it. I think it's got a lot of potential. There's just 1 or 2 little.
I mean, I'm not saying whether it's a new designer or a very old designer or somewhere.
An old designer. It wasn't me. It wasn't. But that was a fun game. Really, really good fun, and with a bit of storytelling narrative.
And then we also played some games that we had nothing to do with. I'm trying to remember what was the first game we played in the evening.
Oh gosh, what did we play? Well, I know we played.
Well, we started off with something. Oh, pictures.
Pictures, of course.
The 2020 Spiel des Jahres winner. This is a lovely game. Oh my gosh, I should have put the picture on Twitter so that I could show it now. But it's a very asymmetric game. There's 5 different ways that you're trying to show pictures. It's kind of like charades or Pictionary, where the target, what you're trying to get someone to guess, is one of 16 pictures on the table.
Yeah.
And then the possibilities are either you do pixel art, where you've got a 3x3 grid of cubes, or you've got 2 strings, which you have to arrange into things, or you've got some sticks and stones.
Yes.
Or you've got cards with pre-printed
cards
things
with
on
kind of concepts on them.
And the 5th option is like these 3-dimensional blocks.
Yeah.
Although I think I was the only person who used the 3-dimensionality of them to kind of push the make one thing appear bigger by pushing it more into the foreground. Yeah.
It's a great little game. It doesn't actually require artistic ability, although
I mean, it's about the creativity.
By coincidence, I think the order at the end was in order of people who were more artistic, but that I think was coincidental, as it happens. You don't have to. I mean, I've run it before, and I have the artistic ability of a small dead slug.
I mean, it is definitely about creative thinking, and I can absolutely see why this would win the Spiel des Jahres, because it is asymmetric, but everyone's got the same objective, and that asymmetry is just a different method and a different sense of agency, as a different sense of affordances towards the same goal. So it's not actually that difficult to say, here is how you use this new thing.
That's right.
But it keeps it fresh. Every single round, you have a new system that you're trying to use. And frankly, if you can deal with Pictionary and charades, I think you can deal with this.
I mean, the lovely types of things is, can you represent an actual picture on a card, like they're photographs, with a long piece of string and a short piece of string, and that's all you've got. And that is such a fun idea.
And then you try to make this sculpture, and you try to wind it.
It's lovely.
It's lovely. Other than that, you went to some convention last weekend.
Charlie and I went to the Continuum Tabletop convention, hence title. What's it? Continuum. There we go. That's a mixture of tabletop role playing and board games, and I mainly did board games. Charlie played and ran a freeform, and there was lots of tabletop going on as well. So that was really good fun. And it was good. The thing is, the last time we had a Continuum was 2018, and they had just
paused for the pandemic, and
they had just announced that from 2020 they were going to go annual, and then we didn't even make 2 years. So now that's a 4-year gap instead of But they are going. There will be one next year as well. So
very exciting.
So that's really good.
And I think that feels like enough stuff. Like we just had a good time. I've been enjoying the wandering ground. It's been warm, lovely cat, and apart from that, let's talk about brilliant thing. What's the little thing which is brilliant? Before we get onto the main topic, I'd like to give a quick shout out to grass.
Grass. What a good idea. Yes.
I think that grass is lovely, just under your feet, and gives a bit of color to the place. It's very hardy. I think it's easy to grow. I mean, it's underappreciated. It's considered a weed. But
grass between your toes, guys. Yes, I like it.
Grass, it's a brilliant thing. So now shall we get on with the main topic? Okay. As always, feel free to comment, ask questions, fun, like, follow. So let me change the things, and if you could open the book and let us know what's
the actual definition of advantage tokens from the building blocks of tokens, which is roughly the same as the board game geek one. One player has a token that permits them to perform a special action or modify an action. Once used, the token passes to another player. So that last bit, passing the token to another player, is very important for advantage token, because it means that there's quite a big decision space.
And I think the wording of that is identical to how it is defined on Board Game Geek. On Board Game Geek, it mentions that it's first used in Storms over Arnheim, and it's been used to great impact in many games since, notably as a China card in Twilight Struggle.
Oh, look, I happen to have an example here. Sorry, guys. Yeah, there we go. Blimey. Ooh, that's hard. Yeah, the China card. So just using that as an example, basically, the USSR player, for those who don't know Twilight Struggle, it's Cold War.
So in Twilight Struggle, each turn, which I will... So in this game, Twilight Struggle, each turn, you're playing a card and you will always get a benefit. Sometimes you're giving your opponent a benefit. Right. And the China card, you don't give your opponent any immediate benefit.
No, with the China card, the China card is a strong card anyway because it's 4 operations points, which is quite rare. But if you play all of the actions, all of the operations points in Asia, you get an extra one, so you get 5 in Asia. But the point here is that when you play it, you give it to your opponent, and that means that that is additional to your hand size, so it doesn't clog up your hand. It's a completely separate card. So you're giving it to your opponent, and your opponent can't use it on the same round, I think it is, but they can use it later. So you're there, although can't be immediately used by opponent. It's a very powerful card which they can use in the future. And if you still got it at the end of the game, if it goes a distance, you get an extra point.
Thematically, is this meant to suggest that China kept flipping back and forth in supporting the 2 powers that be in the kind of Cold War?
It suggests that China had some kind of balance of power type role between the Americans and the USSR. They didn't really exercise it, I think, in the Cold War. But it suggests that both of the major superpowers, are taking into account the attitude of China. So it's quite historically relevant, and that's really, really nice design. And that is designed by James,
by Anandi Gupta and Jason Matthews.
Jason Matthews, of course.
And just to say that on Board Game Geek, there are not that many games with this mechanism. There's 65, which is a very low number considering the tens, hundreds of thousands of board games. They are mainly war games. So as you can just to give this is only the 8th series and what's going to be a very long series. We're not even halfway through the A's. And yeah, let's, I guess, continue looking at some examples. We've already started. But maybe we want to look at Concordia, which is a lovely game. Have you played this?
I have played it a couple of times. I haven't got it, but I've played it.
And it's this Praefectus Magnus, where basically what happens is if you are generating resources, if you have this card, you generate double the resources instead.
Right.
And you pass it to the player on your right. It starts off as an advantage for the player last in turn order.
Oh, right, that's a good mechanism.
And then, so it's like, boom, you're slightly disadvantaged by being last. Well, once you've used it, it goes to the player to your right, and it goes to the player to the right. So the first player will get the last opportunity to use the Praefectus Magnus card. And then you can see, interestingly, at the game end, similarly to the China cards, there is an endgame bonus where it's a tiebreaker. The player with the most victory points wins the game. That's why they're called victory points. But a tie is won by the player owning the Praefectus Magnus or by the tied player who would receive the Praefectus Magnus next.
Right. Oh, okay. Yes. Oh, that's good. I like the integration of the advantage token into the theme and the historical setting. That's really lovely, rather than just as an add-on. I mean, I must admit,
I am a bit blind to the historical relevance of what the Praefectus Magnus even means.
I don't know either, but it feels vaguely thematic, doesn't it? Which is nice.
I mean,
I'm going to be honest. It's a powerful Roman figure of some type. Roman office. I guess.
I don't look at that card and think, oh, this
yes,
is
I must play. I am this guy. No, you don't really. Do.
I have the fave or the prefixes. I just honestly, when I'm playing a game like Concordia, I don't think about the theme that much. I think mainly about how to win and the points and things.
Yes, so do I.
But what do you think about? There's some things where they are tied so much into the game end, and they have this incentive not only to use it at the appropriate time, but also an incentive to hold on to it, which is an interesting twist.
Yes, I like it because it gives the player another thing to think about when they're thinking about when they're considering whether to play. I mean, a good example of that is Combat Command Europe. It's another war game. This has
let me
great, thank you. This has you can see it has an initiative card. So the initiative card starts with one side or the other, and Combat Commander is a tactical World War II war game. Basically, you can use the initiative card, i.e., pass it to the other player in order to re-roll any dice roll.
And the dice rolls
they're on the cards.
Done by cards, but basically it means that you ignore the cards that would be played for the dice rolls, and then you go on.
Yeah. Now, the reason I mention it in this, because if you've got the initiative card right towards the end of the game, the Combat Commander has a sudden death. So towards the end of the game, depending on the situation, you roll to see if you've won. You have to roll lower than a particular value. So if you roll and you are
and you think that you could do better,
you can pass the initiative card across. So the temptation, obviously, there is to keep the card till right at the end of the game. But Combat Commander's got a sufficient number of very dramatic actions that can happen that there's always that temptation to, oh no, if only I'd rolled better, then I could have got this particular advantage. So there's a temptation is to hand it over, not keep it till the end of the game, and that's a lovely decision to have to make.
Yeah, a quick hello to Alex. It is lovely to see you. Who asks, I wonder if there's a market for an Australian warfare version. Wombat Commander.
Oh right, thank you. Yes. There's obviously a game there.
Now, carrying on with some examples, we've got some cards from Agricola here. These minor improvements. Normally, what happens with a minor improvement is you take a space, you make your thing. But with these ones, as you can see by the handy graphic design of the arrows, you get some resources. Take stone, or wild boar, or some wood, or even a grain, and then you pass it on to the next person. And this is, again, interesting because there's a question of things that are under your control versus tie-break markers that are at the heart of it. And for example, the prefixes Magnus, if you are generating resources, you don't get a choice to keep it. And with a lot of tie-break tokens, which is a subset of advantage tokens, you don't get the choice. But actually, by giving people the choice, that is one step of interest, thinking, okay, I actually get a slight advantage by doing it earlier, because certain resources are better at certain points in the game, right?
Yeah.
In Agricola. And by the same token, if you've got something that can even help you in the end of the game, and having that change in utility, I think is a massive boon.
Yeah. The Agricola one's interesting because ideally, it goes to your person on your left, does it? Is that right? It goes to your person on your left, yeah.
Yes.
Hence the arrows. Yeah. If you can give it to the person on the left and they don't need that commodity, that's really helpful, because then they'll just think, oh, I don't want to play this, which is fine, because then you've gained the advantage without giving them any advantage. Just if you pass it to somebody who's got a lot of stone or whatever, then
then we are
really
not doing anything.
Yes.
Well, you are not giving them anything, and
anything
it's all upside for you.
Yeah.
And hello, Jess. It is lovely to see you. And of course, check the bottom to see what we're talking about. Now we have some other examples that you've worked on. Should we start off with Airfix battles, maybe?
Let's do that, yeah.
Because it's closer to my hands.
Yeah, thank you.
So
this is a typical wargame implementation of an advantage token. Well, as you'll know, a lot of war games have loads of dice. And if you're rolling loads of dice, you might get a whole bunch of bad rolls. I mean, in Airfix battles, you can sometimes roll 10 dice, and you need 5 and 6s. You roll 10 dice, and you don't get any hits at all. So you can play the Valor counter, and that allows you to re-roll all of those dice. So if it's a rubbishy roll, you can. Now the thing about this one is it works on any set of dice rolls. So if your opponent rolls 10 dice and gets 10 hits, you can say no. You have the Valor counter and re-roll all of those hits, which is also quite a nice thing. And there you've got the decision: is this the whole point of advantage token in a way is this a sufficient advantage to me now to give it up and give that advantage to my
and
opponent?
something
That's
like re-rolling dice, there's that question of probability. I mean, is this enough out with the expectation value that it matters enough? Because normally the dice rolls presumably aren't just going to be a win or lose thing. They are going to be I lose slightly or I lose all my troops and get decimated, in which case, oh no, I wish I had a Valor token. I hadn't given it up when it was just a mild loss.
You can have the well in Airfix battles, if you get behind a tank with a bazooka team, you get a much better chance of knocking out the tank. So you could see, if you're the tank commander, you want to have the Valor counter in case they got behind you and destroy your tank, in which case you say, no, you didn't, there's the Valor counter. Or on the other end, if you're the bazooka team, I'm going to re-roll because I want more hits. So that's
Alex points out that, given the dice rolls, they might actually end up with an even better result.
Yes. If you are, it's always a risk. In this situation, it's always a risk. We wanted to have that dramatic risk situation. Yeah, I re-rolled because I got 6 hits. Oh no, they re-rolled and got 10. That's a shame. The other one I've got is, which I suddenly realised, that technically speaking, March of Progress has an advantage token. So that's
which is again a card. You'll notice most of these are cards.
Yes, but that is in March of Progress, 2-player game. If both players select a move action or a combat action, then one player will have the initiative card, and you have to give up the initiative card, but you choose which person's action goes first. So it's forced. So I'm not. It's a variation. I'm not sure it really counts like the other ones we've been discussing, because it's not the choice you're making is to choose who goes first rather than choosing whether to use the.
But it's still
it's a tie-break version of an advantage token. Yeah.
I mean, I think that there's a few different things to examine here. Firstly, do you get a choice of when to give it up? The second thing is, how situational is it? Like, how much variance is there in the results of what the advantage token gives you? And basically, what does it do?
Yes. Here's the question, Beth. So if in this example there wasn't any choice, you give it up and basically you go first, is that an advantage token? So it's
yes, I think
no choice. It's a tie break on the action, and also there's no choice in what you do with it. Is that still an advantage token?
Yes, absolutely.
It probably is. Yeah.
I mean, as it says in the book, Building Blocks of Tabletop Game Design by Geoff Engelstein and Isaac Shalev, many games use this system less overtly for tie breaking.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, it's not in your face, but it is still such a core part of the game. I think it's such a good way to do it. In a sealed bid auction, for example, ties may be broken by a priority token. Then the token is given to the player who lost the tiebreaker. And
yes, that's the same in that case. That's forced, isn't it? That's forced tiebreak.
Yes, and it does say, yes, this is differentiated from the standard implementation, as the transfer is not controlled by the player. Right. So it's not a decision. So it's more of an upkeep. It's something to keep the game working. But I do think that having that decision in there does make the game more interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, for example, imagine if you had a choice to say, I choose to lose this tie so that I can keep this. I think, well, would you ever do that? Because maybe if you examine that game, there's no reason. In which case, you might as well not make it a decision, because if
it's obvious, it becomes a non-decision. Combat Commander, I found one of the best examples of that. Because with Combat Commander, you're giving up the initiative card, and that just basically that cancels the die roll, and anything to do with that die roll, the trigger error is cancelled, and then you draw another one. So as Alex has said, I think they might get a better roll. And how many times has that happened to me? Lots, actually. Yeah. Or usually what happens is you roll a double one, and you say, "Oh, that's really disastrous, so I'll give it up," and then you roll another double one. That doesn't happen. Obviously, double ones are.
Yeah, I mean it's 1 in 36.
The point is, it can.
But still, 3%
happen.
chance.
Yeah.
3% is not minute.
It can definitely happen.
I think that's.
Have we got any other different examples of implementation? There aren't very many, as you said. There aren't very many games.
I mean, those are the main things that we had on the table. If you want to know what the March of Progress actually potentially looks like on the table, there it is, along with the little advantage token. The one thing I wanted to mention, which isn't an advantage token, but it's very interesting corollary, is Onitama. So this is the game that I was mentioning, where in Onitama, one player is here able to move their characters left, right, or forwards using the boar, or you're able to go 2 forwards or 1 backwards using the tiger. Whereas the other player, using the rooster, is able to go left or right and backwards left or forwards right. And then the eel is able to go either to the right or to... And there's also one in the middle that's not currently being used.
Right.
And so you don't have any normal moves, which I think, because this is the entirety of the game, this stops it being an advantage token as such, because this is the entirety of your move.
So when you use the card, when you use the move, you hand it over?
Essentially, yes. So it doesn't go straight to them, but it goes into this middle zone, and then it will get to the opponents for their next
really
move.
Interesting.
It is a fascinating game.
It kind of almost looks a bit like Chinese chess in a way, doesn't it? But
I mean, ultimately you are winning either by capturing the main character or by getting one person all the way to the other side. So it's very reminiscent of chess, constrained, and it's all about thinking, okay, within this game, what is the 1 or 2 cards that give me an advantage? Maybe in this game, there's only 1 card that allows me to jump forwards. And so this 1 card that allows me to give this, if I've got this, just the threat of using it is massive. And that's an interesting thing with advantage tokens, the difference between something like a Agricola when it's secret and the difference when it's a threat.
Yes. Well, yes. It's the same as in Combat Commander. Knowing that your opponent has got the initiative card is quite a critical thing. Because, or more importantly, knowing that you've got it, it means you can be a bit more flamboyant in your actions. You know you've got to get out of jail. Well, not a get out of jail free, but you've got to kind of, it might get me out of jail card.
Hey, try again card.
Yes. Try again card,
Alex says, it's a lovely game that I refuse to buy because of overproduction. That's totally fair. And Alex, I assume this is a serious question. When money is a tiebreaker, does that count as an advantage token? Because, I mean, my first reaction would be to say no. And I'm trying to think, could I think of a way to say yes? Because in order to give this question the respect that I think it deserves as a regular listener, I'll still no, because unless you are paying, if you were paying for that tiebreaker, I mean, I guess you could.
Oh yes, yes. If you were paying for it, like paying for an action, then effectively the money is a substitute for the action. So conceptually, it's very similar. But if it's just the amount of money you've got,
I think that's
probably not.
Actually, let's imagine there was a game where it was 5 money to do the thing. And normally it's a tie break and you pay some amount, but here it's 5 money, and then you break the tie.
Yeah.
And then the 5 money you give to your opponent. That would be quite similar.
That would be.
But I think it's still different in that something about these advantage tokens is the limitation. Because let's imagine there is 15 money in the game.
Yeah.
At that point, it becomes another auction to break the tie, right?
Right. Yeah.
Because how do you break the tie of who wants to pay the 5 money?
Yes, the point of the token is that a player has. Well, you could make it like a token. You could say, if you've got the most money, you can pay 5 money to break the tie. That is effectively equivalent. Is that equivalent to money?
That would be similar.
It isn't exactly, because somebody might overtake you in terms of the money without taking the token. It is different. It's conceptually slightly different, isn't it? Because I've got the token, if I've got the token, that means I can pay 5 money to break the tie. If I've actually got it, then the fact that you gain more money than me at some point doesn't mean I've lost it. So the key point is the token, isn't it?
I think the key point is the uniqueness of the token.
Yes.
And I think the key point is that only one person can ever have this.
Yeah.
Because if it was just the person with the most money, so I think that's the key thing that differentiates it.
Yes.
That there is literally only one.
Yeah.
And you could have multiple advantage tokens, but they all have to be unique.
Yes.
They all have to give you different advantages.
I think that's right. So in fact, we were musing about this earlier, weren't we, Ben? So you could have a game where you've got maybe you've got 5 actions probably on cards, and
maybe you need to have some basic actions as well. I don't think that's Onitama quite works because, I said, Onitama, that's the only thing you can do. But you need to have some level of basic action that you can do without the advantage tokens.
Maybe. So imagine if you've got 5 cards and they've all got a standard action on them, and both sides, both players have got, or every player's got those. And then when you play one of those cards, you give it to an opponent and flip it over, and it's got a slightly worse action on the other side, or a slightly better action on the other side. So you're giving up that action. You're choosing which one to give up, and you're giving that action to another player, and they're getting either a slightly better action or a slightly worse action. I quite like the idea of you give them the card and you flip it over and it's worse. So eventually, as people play out cards, they end up having to play the worst action and flip it over and give a better action to their opponent. So there's quite an interesting dynamic there as to at what point do I play the bad action, knowing that my opponent's going to get a better one.
And that ties into the whole situational advantage. When do you use this thing? I think that's the key thing and what you would need again is, let's say it's a 2-player game with 5 cards each, you would need 10 unique cards because they do have to be unique.
I think they do have to be unique. Yes.
And I think that's the key thing, that this advantage token, I say token, but I'm going... Yeah, whatever. It's this is the only way to have this advantage, that I have this although if you had a system where you were talking about, I was thinking if one person has the strong, if it's a 2-player game and you start with strong A giving me weak A, and I start with weak A giving you strong A. So you can have 2 of the same thing at the same time, but it will only ever be with 1 player. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Because I start with the inverse of what you start with.
You could do it like... The danger with this is that people end up playing certain specific cards, specific actions, but they don't play the other ones. So you have to design it so that you want to play all different types of actions to give you interesting decisions. I think that's... And you want to put somebody in a situation where actually playing the worst action is the best play.
And anyway, this is getting into a game like theoretical game design. But I think the key point is that action advantage tokens can do so much, and with cards, where's the Agricola cards gone? They can, you can write so much on the card, and thank you very much. You can write so much on a card, and they can do so much that there's no reason why you can't make an entire game out of these. Let's move on to the other questions. How does it impact a game? How will it affect the experience at the table? I think we talked about this with action event cards, And it's very similar, where it's all about understanding the situational benefit, thinking about the timing. When is it better to do this? And when are you getting enough of the momentary advantage?
I like the variety we can have, because obviously sometimes it's just a tiebreaker, in which case, when there's a tie, that's not a problem. Or other times you could find your advantage token could be used much more widely. I mean, I think in Twilight Struggle, if you've got it, you can use it in any of your actions. So actually, you've always got the option of playing the China card if you have it, and that's very powerful. So there's a huge amount of variety you can have.
And it adds an interesting, direct feeling of direct consequences, I guess is a good way to put it. Because when you play a game, even if you lose, you want to understand this is why I lost, and being able to trace this back to say, hey, I had that token and I got this advantage, but then when they had the token, they got this greater advantage. And it's because they timed it better that maybe I lost. And so I think there is this strong element of timing that comes about.
Yes, your judgment over how you maximized the advantage that you get from the advantage token and minimize the advantage your opponent gets for the same token.
And yet we've completely ignored the subset of the no choice tokens, which, how does that affect the game at the table? Because those kind of add a little bit of upkeep, but what those can do is, I suppose, just keep the game running and ensure that you don't have ties when a tie doesn't make the game work.
Yeah, sometimes you just have to have a tie. I mean, if you're playing simultaneous actions like with March of Progress, I basically had to have a way of determining who moved first. If you both choose a move, it's very important who moves first. And combat particularly, who chooses to do the combat first can be absolutely vital, because it can completely swing the outcome of the battle. So there has to be a tie break. I looked at very, very mechanistic. I think the first implementation I had was the initiative card, but you always went first if you had it, and that really didn't make a huge amount of sense. It's much better to give people the choice. And usually, if it's a combat, you want to do your combat first, and if it's a move, you usually want to see where your opponent's move and then move after it. So yeah.
How versatile is it? I think, you need some level of complexity in order to be able to use this mechanism. It is a supporting mechanism. It's not the primary thing. Well, at least the way it's been designed so far in the world, it's never been a main mechanism to get people excited about the game. But I think with any game of what Board Game Geek users would call medium complexity or higher, I think it would fit fairly well.
I think particularly if there are random events which could be at least perceived as relatively extreme. So, I mean, that's why it's used a lot in tactical war games, because you don't want a situation where somebody keeps rolling high dice, if high dice is success, and the other player just doesn't. So it's ameliorating that kind of my opponent's getting really lucky situation, which is very helpful if you've got a kind of dice bucket game like Airfix buckets, or something like Combat Commander, where very key events can happen on the roll of dice. So giving the players some semblance of control. But there's always that situation, often that situation in Combat Commander. You think, I wish I hadn't given up the initiative card then, because if I had it now, it would be better.
And all of this is kind of down to what these things actually do, because here, this is nothing to do with luck mitigation. But at the same time, it is kind of something to ease the ebb and flow, to make it a little bit smoother. But is it just about luck mitigation? Like, when is it good? Who would enjoy it? What do you think, Alan?
I think that it goes well in action event type or action based Euro games. I think because it gives you that extra choice. I mean, that Agricola one is a good example, because it's a minor improvement. It's not critical to the game. It's in what is called the complex card set.
K for complex,
K for
because we're
complex,
speaking
'cause it's,
German.
So it's not a particularly powerful card, but it's lovely and situational. There are going to be times when you want to use it, and because it's a minor improvement, you combine it with something else as well, which is good. So yeah, I think it's kind of I think, as you said, medium complexity. That's an example of using it in a more complex environment, and it's a very good addition to that. And because it's got the timing and judgment issues in it, it goes with those kinds of games which have got a kind of skill set. There's more skill. So perversely, it goes well in the skill-based Euro type of games, and also in games where
there's a lot of luck, but only if you want to slightly mitigate that. Because if you want people to live with that drama, then maybe it's not great.
Yes.
But I think that I was just pondering that it's about games in which you want to think about your opponent, and but the two types of optional play and mandatory play tiebreak advantage tokens are so different that from an implementation point of view and from a how would we use them in this game, I mean, I think that they are basically two different mechanisms almost.
Yes, I mean, even if you look at the kind of the wargaming implementations like Twilight Struggle and Combat Commander, I mean, they're so vastly different games. I mean, Twilight Struggle is much more like a Euro-style game, and it's using it in the Euro-style way. The China card gives you a powerful operations value.
So if we look at these two things separately, like when we might consider using it, one is to add complexity and to add thoughtfulness about having to consider the other opponent's situation and the timing and all those elements. The other one for
luck mitigation.
This is I was going to say for the tiebreak, like the mandatory play essentially.
Yes.
This is kind of just a way of keeping the game running. This is not for extra decisions, really. I mean, I understand that it does bring that in, but when you put this into martial progress, is it fair to say that this is just to make the game function?
Yes, I didn't view that as an advantage token, really. Although it is in technical terms, but it's a forced action you're taking. It's a forced choice. So it's not quite the same. I suppose tiebreak decision is a special case of advantage token, is it? I guess.
Yes, yes. I mean, it is listed as a special case in here, and I was wondering that. So before I read the chapter, and it is there, but I mean, it's possible that there's just not enough games that use it to make it worth splitting, because 65 games is not that many.
Very many. A lot of those games are
war games,
relatively unpublished. Well, they might be. Is it unpublished? They're games which haven't got ratings on them. A lot of them.
And I'm just stretching because the thing reminded me to do a little stretch. And the question is, when is it bad? What issues might there be adding it to a game? Let's talk about this token in martial progress. Were there any issues there, Alan?
Well, the main issue I had was should it be a choice or should it not be a choice? And really is. Because it's
should it be a choice of whether to go first or second?
Yes. I mean, it has to be there, but I looked at whether it's going to be mechanism. And I don't like the mechanism. If you can have a player choice in there, I prefer to have a player choice rather than have it mechanism.
But it sounds like it's always going to be the same choice. If you're fighting, you will go first. If you're moving, you'll go second.
Well, I mean, there are the occasional situations where you might want to move first.
So there is more than 5% chance of reversing that.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
When is it bad? I think if you're looking at it in an action-based game, if it's just I can put this mechanic in, and it doesn't really make sense in terms of the theme or the rest of the game, you're just putting it in because you're just injecting a bit more complexity for no other reason. I think it has to be implemented in a way that makes sense thematically or in terms of the game system. So I think the Agricola one, let's face it, the Agricola one, I think it's only 4 cards. I think it's only 4 cards in the whole game that do that.
I mean, in the complex deck, yes, there were only 4, unless there's something that I missed.
In the Agricola world, you have got loads and loads and loads of improvements, both minor and major. So it does make sense.
You're not going to see all of them in one game.
No. So it does make sense to have that in there because it's another thematic implementation of an improvement.
One thing that occurs to me is that it is like action events where you are giving something up to your opponents. You are having to give something up. So people who don't like giving something up are not going to enjoy this. But at the same time, because of the delay in which it can come back to hurt you, I think it's a lot more pleasant because you still get the, I'm going to do this big thing on my turn and I'm going to take disadvantage now. And maybe you take disadvantage later, but you don't get disadvantage right now. Yeah. So you still get that feeling of, okay, I get to do this, and maybe you get to do it, but later on.
Yeah.
And that can, but yeah, there is, I will say that most of these games have been 2-player. And I think there's a reason for that, which is that in the 2-player zero-sum game, where you are really thinking deeply about the timing of everything, I think that in a multiplayer game, it would be a lot harder to do and to say, okay, things always go to the right or things always go to the left. And
I think there it shouldn't overwhelm, if you like, normal play. It shouldn't be something so powerful that it distorts the normal.
Why not?
Play.
Well, I mean, if that is the raison d'etre of the game. I mean, none of these games have been, but I think that even though it hasn't been a primary mechanism, well, that's no reason to suggest that it couldn't be.
Well, I'm not sure that would be I don't think that would be easy to implement, because if I've got the token, and it's the absolutely critical thing in the game, why am I going to give it up unless I can win? That's the point. So that's why I'm thinking, like the China card, for example. If the China card had been 6 operations points. That would be overwhelmingly good.
You mean 6 going on 7 rather than 4
going on 5. I mean, 4 going on 5 means 4 is it's as good as a good card.
It's as good as the best other cards in the game.
Yeah. Yes, in terms of operations, but not it hasn't got an event associated with it. So it's definitely one of the best cards. If you play it, the restriction to get it as a 5 is playing them all in Asia, which you may not want to do. So it's not overwhelmingly good. But if it was like 6 going on 7, it would be so good you'd probably end up playing the China card a lot. And it would be distorting. It would distort the rest of the game because the China card would be too powerful, I think. And that would be a danger.
Sorry, I thought you started off saying one thing, but then it seems like you changed your mind, which is totally okay.
Oh no,
so you started off saying that you would only use it when it's going to win you the game. Which suggests that you're suggesting like holding it back until that one critical moment, which is totally fair.
If it was
but then if it's powerful, now you're saying you would want to give it back. But isn't that the whole tension? Isn't that the joy of, hey, I've got this amazing thing which gives me potentially 7 actions, and so am I going to give it, is it late enough that I am able to now give it and it doesn't come back to hurt me?
That's the one. Yes. So I mean, it's very situational. If you've got an advantage token which is so overwhelming that it's going to win you the game, you want to play it at a time when you can win the game and keep it until then, because it's unique.
And the point being that you would never use it until then.
I think so. I think that's right.
But then this is where, I mean, normally there aren't multiple advantage tokens. And actually, I won setting on Itama, which is not really the same, but like, I wonder if Agricola is the only game that really has multiple advantage tokens.
I don't know. I was wondering about something like The Expanse, whether it has similar things to. I mean, there are plenty of games which have cards which, when you use it, another player can do something. But that's usually when you play the card, isn't it? You don't give them the card. So multi-use cards, there's obviously a link with multi-use cards, but in this case, the point about the token aspect is important. It's
Well,
giving up the token, and then your opponent has
it's the point that it passes on.
It passes on, and your
And
opponent
there's
has a
only
choice
one of
about
this
whether
type
to
thing.
use it. Yeah, that's the key. Yeah.
And then if there were multiple of these, like in the hypothetical
Yes.
game design that
Yeah,
we were
yeah.
talking about, in that situation, you would want these to be super powerful because you want them to be the raison d'etre of the game, the exciting thing that you're doing.
Have to, in that particular example we were looking at, you have to play the cards. You have to give up the advantage token. Well, you could decide you actually have to give up an advantage token every time you take an action, because you're always giving it to your opponent so they can use it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. At which point the question becomes, if the only thing you can do, if there is no basic action, then is it an advantage token? Does it? And I think that I would submit to whatever Geoff Engelstein and Shalev say at this point, because at that point, is it just Onitama? And is Onitama in that case an advantage token game?
Yeah. Well, these are in fact just labels, and sometimes you get the grey area between the labels.
And that's the thing. Like the grey area is the most interesting part. Can we agree on that?
Yeah. Yes, definitely. I mean, for example, I didn't classify March of Progress as a.
You're holding it upside down.
Yeah, I didn't classify March of Progress as a game with an advantage token. Although actually, according to the definition, it does. It has the initiative card. And I didn't think of it when I was doing that. I didn't think of it in that sense.
And you've used this in a couple of your games, as you've talked about Airfix battles, March of Progress. How has that experience been? Do you think you will continue to use it regularly?
I think so, particularly for the war games, because I think it gives the players that extra choice. And well, if I've got a dice game, I'm sensitive to the fact that sometimes the dice go horribly wrong, and you want to have something that mitigates that. So that's why we put the Valor token. The Valor token fits with the Airfix battles, what I describe as Hollywood war game type of approach, which is it's got to be super dramatic. People have got to be able to, do the charge into battle recklessly and have some method of getting out of sticky situations or pushing home their momentary advantage. And that's what the Valor token is for. It is about that valorous charge against the pillbox or against a tank. That's what it's for. So it fits really well with that Hollywood war game type of approach. I wouldn't probably put it into more of a war game simulation, because it feels like you're giving the player a bit too much control over the situation. If it was a simulation game, but for a fun, dramatic or melodramatic game, I think it works really well.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like is often the case, I gained a little bit more respect for this mechanism. I've gained a bit of understanding, and I hope that everyone else has as well along the way. It feels like it's time to start wrapping up at this point, where Alan, would you like to ask the question of the day? Question of the day. What's the little question before we go on our way?
That's a good question. Okay, how hot is it going to be where you are in the coming day or two?
I don't even know the answer to that question. That forces me to look things up.
It's going to be like 35 or something here in sunny Cambridgeshire. I'm wondering whether there's people are in the audience who are in different areas who can share what their weather is like. I think there are people from
all over
around the world. So
and if I look up the weather for London, because I will be going back there tomorrow. No, this is a terrible website. Let me try and find. I'll go up to
won't tell you which website
now. So today in London it is 30. Yes. Thursday it's 34, and Friday it's 34. Saturday it's 36. And then it starts coming down 34 and 28. Oh wow! So quite a big.
Not as hot as it not as hot as it has been, but still. And at least the humidity really counts. I think it feels quite humid today, so it feels a bit hotter and muggier.
Alex says, down here, so far away in Sussex, it is 33 degrees.
Oh, I see. I think the southwest is supposed to be hotter.
Yeah, I think we are, well, when I go back, it's going to be a bit hotter than it has been over here.
Well, as you can see best by looking out the window, if you look far enough in that direction, you get to the North Sea with no breaks in the landscape.
I cannot see
You
the
can't
North
see
Sea.
the North Sea, but trust me, there's no hills between here and the North Sea, so we get nice North Sea breezes.
Okay.
Or gales.
I believe that.
Yes,
And so, yes, what temperature is it where you are? Alan Paul wants to know. So, and of course, let us know what you're up to. Over to what you're up to. You can share what's on me if you want to. So what's something that you want to share? Please go ahead. I promise that we care. Something you're looking forward to, something that you need to do, hopes, ambitions, or just tell us about your current situation. Alex says, the trick apparently will be retaining this heat through the winter. That's something that is a bit beyond us, for sure.
Yeah.
Personally, I think it's okay to let people know in public that we are going to a very exciting bouncy place.
We're going to Inflator Bounce, which is just up the road.
I've never been to this place, but it's like loads of bouncy castles, but I hear that it's, I'm not sure if it's been oversold, but it's like not just a flat bouncy thing, but there's actual chairs and like all sorts of bouncy objects you can kind of bounce off, also, like inside the house.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a massive warehouse full of bouncy castles, loads and loads of different. There's a dragon you can crawl through. There's castles you can climb up.
And Charlie told me that they've got an interesting pricing scheme where it's £12 for children and £3 for adults.
Well, funnily enough, it is aimed at children or children of adult age, let's face it.
And so if you're a child of adult age, then you get an amazing discount.
Yes, you do. You do
£3.
Yes.
And I was
we are allowed to go on.
I was slightly surprised that yes, you don't have to be with a child. You are allowed to just go yourself as an adult. And apparently there are sometimes groups of teenagers or whatever going for a bit of a giggle.
That's true. Yes. It's definitely a fun day. I think there's air conditioning. I hope to God there's air conditioning. Otherwise, that's going to be really hot. I'm pretty sure.
I'll be changing my t-shirts back out, and then
there's lots of drinks.
I'll have an afternoon shower. But to recap and wrap up before we finish up, so we've got the China card, which is the main thing. Like, it's thinking about when to use this, getting extra actions, and you've got the end game benefit that pushes all of these aspects, all these lovely crunchy decisions into one. Sometimes you've got tokens which frankly don't do much in terms of adding decisions into a game, but it helps the game function because you need it to sometimes say, well, these players are trying to do things that contradict one another or trying to do something at the same time. Okay, who exactly goes first? Sometimes it's a way of mitigating a bit of luck. Sometimes it's a way of, adding a bit of interaction to a game. And sometimes again, a way of mitigating luck. And I think that whether it's used for utility, I think it feels like a perfectly reasonable thing. If you need a way to solve tie breaks in a two-player game, this is perfect.
Yes.
In a multiplayer game, then you've got the issue that, okay, the person with the token chooses the person who's wins the tie, and then either it passes on or it doesn't, and either way, it's not quite as satisfying in a multiplayer game.
Because that requires a judgment of every single player's position in the game.
Yes, and I like the track that David Brain's used in a couple of prototypes, and there's been in a few published games where it's, okay, you pay to go up this other track, and and then once you break the ties, or just, hey, when you break the tie, you jump to the bottom, so you're not going to break the next tie. And that feels a little bit more fair somehow. And what Alex says, That's cool. Probably referring to the inflatable land.
I should stress we are taking the grandchildren. It's not.
I mean, it is for me.
Oscar and Beth.
And Bez.
It's not. Honestly, it's not for us. Yes, it is.
And Bez.
But yeah, and Bez. Yeah, taking the grandchildren and Bez. Yes. I should just sit quietly in the corner somewhere.
But yeah, recapping and wrapping up. Yeah, as always, there's a couple of things on Board Game Geek that have been definitely mislabeled.
Yes.
And
which
I think
a lot
it's interesting because actually learning what all these categories mean is incredibly tricky, and you don't expect someone who's just adding a new game to the database.
It's almost like you need a book with more in.
Do you have anything else that you feel we should say before we finish up? I've not written notes.
I'm also looking forward to the possibility of playing Snails and Grails with you and Charlie.
Yes.
So that should be something which is fun. That's our Snails and Grails legacy game, which we are developing.
And so if you want to check me out, I'm Stuff by Bez in all the places. Stuffbybez.bigcartel.com if you want to buy my stuff. Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook. Search for Stuff by Bez. And if you want to join my Discord, stuffbybez.com/Discord. And of course, if you want to work out what's happening in the future, the Kickstarter that I'm hoping will happen, but I've given Chris all the artwork for a game about selecting 7 cards, speedily searching for synergies. Yeah, I don't know I'm hoping that this will be done in time for Rob to be able to print out a bunch of copies in time for Tabletop Scotland. We'll see how it goes. I don't want to put it up until the actual files are done, but it'll also be my birthday on Saturday, and so I don't know if I'll do a special stream or maybe a short stream. I'll decide whatever I want. Because if there's a day that I should do whatever I want, it's certainly that day. Thank you, everyone. It's been a delight. And Alan, Snails and Grails, says Alex. Yes, indeed. And let me try and copy-paste all your links and put them in. And Alan, if you can remind people where to find you.
Well, I generally do email because I'm old. Alan@alanpaul.co.uk or alan@surprisetakegames.co.uk. I'm on Twitter as Bensonfish, and I'm on Board Game Geek as Alan Paull. That's how the best time to get hold of me. And I've got a blog on surprisetakegames.co.uk.
So for now,
please do go there, and you can actually subscribe to my blog. Although I don't post very often, so I won't overwhelm you.
And we can indeed be found at the Bouncy Castle Park for a short while at least. And for now, lots of love to everyone, and bye. This is a goodbye song to do. Bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye. This is the end of the show. Bye. And now it's time to go. Bye.